Welcome to this special presentation of Investing in Psychedelics, brought to you by the Canadian Securities Exchange in partnership with CFN Media. Hi, my name's Anna Sarah, and I'm Director of Listings Development with the Canadian Securities Exchange. Today, I am joined as part of our Investing in Psychedelic initiative. I am joined by Aaron Weaver, who is Senior General Counsel for ATAI Life Sciences. Thank you so much for joining me, Aaron.
I'm absolutely delighted to be here, and thank you for the invitation to speak, Hannah.
So why don't you, I think in this sector, as we're all learning about it as a community in the capital markets, I think probably ATAI Life Sciences is one of the more recognized companies that's out there. So tell us all about it.
Yeah, so we started within the space a number of years ago. It was really a mission that was born out of personal connection and what we saw as critical failures within the prevailing standard of care. What we have grown into is a mental health innovation platform that is focused on evidence-based therapies that predominantly is really lent towards the development of psychedelic therapies, where there has been significant scientific inquiry for the last number of decades, and probably a much more sort of prevalence of that within the last few years, where we do think that these psychedelic therapies have a prospectively large curative effect against large patient populations. I think we all know the patient need here, and it's one that is there's 300 million people globally with treatment-resistant depression, 320 million with PTSD, and World Health Organization recognizes by 2030 that mental health disorders will probably carry the largest disease burden globally. And we're really trying to catalyze innovation in an area that has historically seen very little innovation. And if we take a look back, in the last significant degree of change within mental health care really occurred with the development of selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors more than 30 years ago for the treatment of depressive disorders, and there hasn't been a lot of change since then. So what ATAI aims to do is it operates under an outcomes-driven business model, where it creates an organizational ecosystem that really accelerates the accessibility of therapies. And so it does that in a unique way by utilizing a shared services model that removes a lot of distractions for scientific founders and lets them excel in their zone of excellence. And so it allows the scientists to be able to lean on the deep domain expertise of ATAI specialists across operational, regulatory, clinical, financial, and other aspects, where the scientists who understand these compounds best can only really focus on the foundational science and not have to be caught up in the distractions of having to try run a company, get to know investors, and be able to do the things that just really take them outside of their zone of excellence. Overall, the mission of ATAI is to develop personalized therapies that target the patient and to really herald an era of precision mental health care.
And I know that ATAI is vast and wide, and kind of all of the different projects that you're working on. Is there any psychedelic therapies that are in development right now that you think will have, some significant promises?
Thanks. It's an interesting question, because I do think that a lot of the recent literature and press, particularly if you look at books like How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan and some of the prominent features, say, for example, on the Joe Rogan podcast, have really placed an emphasis on the therapeutic potential of psilocybin. What we are really excited about at the moment at ATAI is the therapeutic potential of arketamine and also ibogaine. And these are both compounds that we have in clinical development at the moment. So arketamine is a non-psychedelic, so it's basically the R enantiomer from racemic ketamine. S-ketamine has effectively been approved under the label name Spravato, and this was a significant catalyst for the psychedelics industry because it actually demonstrated that the FDA and regulatory bodies were willing to use psychedelics in treating patients for mental health disorders, and that now has become commercially available.
Am I correct in, just going down this path myself and learning about it, am I correct that ketamine is considered more a dissociative drug, and that's kind of what a lot of it's being used for?
Uh,
or its dissociative elements?
Yeah, so there has been a train of thought that dissociation sort of drives the patient outcomes, and the dissociation causes the remission in the depressive symptoms that a patient experiences. The thesis that we're putting forward here is that it's actually not the dissociation that drives the withdrawal from depression. It's something that's a little bit more complicated that
Okay.
occurs within the glutamatergic system. And what we do view about our ketamine within the broader context of treating treatment-resistant depression is that if if you can be effective without having dissociation and using this type of ketamine, our ketamine, then it become much more broadly available outside of clinics, whereby there is a little bit of a restriction on patients getting access into clinics, getting reimbursed by health insurers, taking the time out of work and out of their family lives to go and seek the therapy. Whereas our genuine hope here is that our ketamine will become available as a prescription over the counter medication that can be used at home.
Right. And, I think the one thing, watching ATAI has been quite interesting. You've obviously had the ability to raise lots of capital in the space, which gives you the opportunity to kind of spread your wings as far as the sector. As this is coming to capital markets, is this kind of a surge in the industry, or do you think this has always been trucking along in the background? We're just finally seeing it kind of in the capital raising side of things.
Look, I think capital rewards good ideas, and where there is true merit in terms of advancing things that have commercial or societal a value or creative elements. And I think the reason why the capital attractiveness grew recently was a lot of the scientific inquiry that came over the last few decades has really started to pick up pace with various enabling technologies, with things like quantitative EEG and fMRI, allowing a much better understanding of the brain. And with that data that comes out of these types of techniques, a better understanding that these compounds actually have therapeutic promise as opposed to being drugs of abuse.
And just not to put you on the spot here, but as this plays out, I mean, companies like Atai seem like the right business model for this kind of platform. How do you think the large pharmaceutical companies are coming at this, approaching it, thinking about it, and their place in this in the future?
I think they're watching the space with interest. It's from what we've seen, particularly across a number of the medical bodies, or say, for example, the American Psychiatric Association. They've been hosting panels on this, whereby large pharma participants are attending and paying a lot of interest on the sector. I mean, just broadly in relation to the business model of large pharmaceutical companies, they do engage in a significant amount of R&D, but then there is a lot of other R&D that is left to smaller specialty biopharma companies. And, I think that there is definitely a space for players like Atai and Compass to really coexist with the larger pharmaceutical companies of the world. But I think that it's really heralded an area of sort of significant interest from the pharma companies.
Well, the one element of the sector that I've really grown to appreciate as I've done my due diligence in this process is it seems to me that in most applications in the psychedelic space, there is always an element of patient care as well as the drug itself. And I think that's something that should have been married all the way along, as we've developed kind of the drug atmosphere in our society, that you really shouldn't be taking any kind of pharmaceutical without some kind of assistance, on kind of that mental level. And so I think this sector definitely, it doesn't seem like you can really have one without the other. So I very much appreciate that it'll push that as far as how we handle, medical care going forward.
Yeah, I think the way that we see this, that's very true as a statement. We see this as a container of experiential medicine. I think that there will be a paradigm shift in the way that medical communities and patients look at mental health care and mental well-being. It's no longer about taking a pill and sort of neutralizing or managing symptoms, as opposed to looking at full stage recovery and curative effects around mental health and people living their best lives. Around that is very much an integrative care model, whether it's psychotherapy or digital therapeutics, which I think in many examples can sort of very much help with the patient journey and allow the opportunity for more timely interventions and being able to just manage the baseline for a lot of the patients. I think that this is probably, and this will definitely move into a new era of sort of personalized mental health care.
So on that note, what do you think the future of the psychedelic sector will look like?
Thanks. It's a really interesting question, and I think one that's probably pretty broad in scope, and something I'd like to break down into two parts. I think one, I'd just like to focus on what are the real near-term catalysts for moving the industry. And the second part is just probably to speak about some broader trends. I think what's really imminently exciting for us is that there's a number of organizations. So everyone knows MAPS, which is the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, and Compass Pathways, which is a company that we are the largest shareholder within, both moving into late stage clinical studies. And this is where they will get to demonstrate and show the broad scale efficacy of these compounds, and also really just to make a very bold statement about the therapeutic promise of them in front of regulatory bodies, and then really push towards more widespread adoption of these compounds as therapeutic agents within mental health disorders. I think that this will probably really help drive a focus towards more outcomes-based approaches within mental health. We've just really, particularly in psychiatry, we very much focused on treating the disease and what we would understand to be a very sort of biologically mechanistic way of managing some of these mental health disorders, as opposed to really being focused on treating the patient. And I think that this is where this whole field goes, particularly with psychedelic initiated interventions and the broader application of different types of therapies available, whether it's talk therapy or digital therapeutics, or for example, there are different types of media products that can integrate into a lot of this, where players like ourselves and other types of entities can provide a much more personalized approach to mental health care.
It's going to be amazing to watch this all develop. And I think the one thing that's been interesting is I think there's a lot of intrigue by the retail market into the space. But I think the retail market is, they're learning as we're all learning together, and the applications for this are much more a different purview than what the cannabis space really brought to the capital markets. And I know that some of the research and development being done is very capitally intensive. So, happy that we have an audience in the space that'll help fund these initiatives. Is there anything about ATAI that you guys are working on kind of this year that is worth noting?
Look, we have a lot of exciting projects that will come to market and that we'll announce soon. It's an area that we are all very, very deeply passionate about, and we work with rigor and a real degree of excitement around what we do. We feel that it brings change to people's lives. We all have a personal connection with the company mission, and we're deeply dedicated towards what we do. I think just keep your eyes peeled for what we'll be doing in the market. We will, we'll continue to increase our media visibility and help push on some of the patient advocacy measures, and really sort of try promulgate ideas around the merit of using psychedelic agents in relation to treating some of this mental health burden.
Wonderful. Well, listen, Aaron, I can't thank you enough. I'm excited to host you Wednesday, June 17th, alongside many peers in the space. I think there's going to be some amazing discussion that comes from it. And again, can't thank you enough for joining us.
Thank you, Anna. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thanks.